Hello, everyone. This is Bridget Danner from Hormone Detox Shop, and I'm here with my friend and colleague today, Dr. Debi Silber. Hi, Debi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing all right. I was sharing, I'm just kind of up and down right now in this time. Like sometimes I find my peace in Corona land, and sometimes I'm like, oh God.
I
So,
know. It's like
yeah.
we're learning so much and we want to share the good and not get too freaked out by the bad. And I'm just so overwhelmed with the kindness that I'm seeing from people.
And that is very true. Yes, some of my favorite coaches and colleagues and friends are really doing a lot of research and giving away their findings or hosting like webinars. Or one of my coaches I posted today, he just hosts this hour every day where we do focused work, just so you can get out of your spin and just get focused. It's really great. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff coming out of it. So we're going to talk about things that could be triggering you emotionally, separation, recent betrayals and losses during this time where we have this extra layer of social isolation, quarantine, financial worry, stress. But before we do that, I just want to introduce you a little bit. I believe you're an FDN like me, for one thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you have some functional health training, but you recently became a doctor, got a doctorate. Can you tell us what that was about and what you studied?
Sure. It's a PhD in transpersonal psychology. That's the psychology of transformation and human potential. And I've been in health, mindset, personal development forever. But I decided to enroll in this PhD program after my betrayal. And first I had a betrayal from my family. It was horrible. And you know how the universe works. When you don't quite learn the lesson you're supposed to learn, you get another opportunity. I did. And this time it was my husband. And anybody who's been through it, shocked, devastated, but I thought about it and I said, it's always, I have 4 kids, 6 dogs, running a business. I wasn't even on my own to-do list. And I was like, no. Now it's about me. I had no idea why I felt so compelled to join this PhD program, enroll in this program, but I did. And then while I was there, I did a study. And I studied betrayal. What holds us back? What helps us heal? And what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive? And that study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my business, changed my family, changed my life. And it's just been a completely different everything ever since.
Wow. So you just took it in like full force, going for the PhD. I don't even know why I'm doing this, but I'm just going to go.
I'm telling you, it was really, it just was divinely guided. I felt so pulled to do it. I think it started because I was like, no, it's my turn. And it was coupled with really that whole realization of wanting to understand how the mind works and why people do these things and how I could heal. That was really it. I was in such a bad spot. And I just thought, okay, for me, it always helps to learn, to understand. And I was like, okay, maybe I can learn my way out of this one.
Yeah.
And what we learned, what I learned and what happened, even going through the study, it changed my life. And the participants, I chose to do a qualitative study versus quantitative, meaning fewer participants dive in super deep instead of many participants, much more, more shallow. And the conversations, because I wanted to know, who were you before? What happened to you physically, mentally, and emotionally during each, part of this process? What did it lead to? And then what happened when you did certain things? And the beauty of it is, with these 3 discoveries, and I'm happy to share what they were, but one of the biggest discoveries was we learned, if you're going to heal, and people choose to or not, you will go through 5 stages. You can't skip them. You can't avoid them. You can if you don't heal. But if you're going to heal, you'll go through these stages. And we know physically, mentally, emotionally what happens at every stage. And we know what it takes to move from one stage to the next. That was hugely exciting.
Wow. Very interesting. Are these the same stages as like the stages of grief, or are they not quite the same?
It gets compared to that a lot. The difference is we know physically, mentally, and emotionally what someone's likely to be experiencing. And I'm happy to even share what the 5 stages are, but it's truly what you're going through, not just the mental, emotional, but the physical too.
Okay. Yeah, and we will come back around. I'm going to change the order of things, tie this back into coronavirus and quarantine right now. But since we're talking about this, yeah, what are the 5 stages? What do you notice? Like, what are some of the circumstances folks were in? Because I think one thing I learned as I'm going through my own journey is there's a lot of ways we feel. I know, well, I'm reading a book right now about abandonment, and there's a lot of ways we feel it, even like your kids leaving home to go to college. Like, it's not like an on purpose abandonment. It's just a thing, but you feel this loss anyway. So I'm curious, like, what are the different manifestations of betrayal or loss or that you see?
Yeah, and grieving is a huge part of betrayal because you're grieving your expectations, you're grieving what you thought you had, you're grieving the relationship that's no longer, you're grieving the version of you that you're leaving behind as you recreate a newer version of you. And what I teach is rebuilding is always a choice, whether you rebuild yourself and move on, and that's what I did with my family. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing and you want to, you rebuild something entirely new with the person who hurt you. And that's what I'm doing with my husband. Totally different. But you can't birth that new unless you grieve the old. It's like an old identity. It's amazing how, and I see everybody in the community go through this. Like for this, I actually thought, and as a researcher, you're not supposed to have any expectations or whatever. And I was new, but I just assumed that someone who was the hardest hit would grow the least because they had the most to overcome. I was dead wrong. That had nothing to do with it. But there were 3 reasons why people didn't heal, and very definite reasons why they did. And it's so interesting. So what we really learned was healing is a choice. And I know it sounds so crazy. But I do believe also that betrayal is one of the most painful of the human experiences, because we're never betrayed by people we don't know. These are the people we're closest to, and this is the person you trust the most. This is the person who says, I got you, you're safe with me. And it's like they just take a mask off and it's like, that's who you've been. And it's a shock. And that shock just imprints on the body and mind.
Yeah, I've learned a lot about beliefs and how, I don't share the same ones as everyone else and how they're all shaped. There's some beliefs, like as I go through my own separation, like, I really wanted to believe, marriage is forever, everything can be worked out. And I didn't want that belief taken away from me by the circumstances I was in. But as we mentioned before the call, you don't necessarily have to give up on what you believe in, but everything's going to get dumped out. That's for sure. You're going to have to figure out what you want to pick back up.
It definitely takes time to sort out and sort through. And it shakes up every single thing we know. And what you're saying is like a classic stage 2. And I'm happy to go through the stages.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Where it's like the bottom has truly bottomed out. And your worldview has been destroyed. Your worldview is your mental model. It's your mental construct, like this person's safe. These are the rules. This is how it works. And in one shocking moment, your entire worldview is shattered. So, and a new worldview hasn't been sort of constructed yet. So it's terrifying. It's just a terrifying space because it's like we don't know where we fit in. We don't know anything. Everything we knew has been taken away. And someone in my, one of my participants said, you know what it feels like? It feels like, imagine every negative emotion you can experience, getting punched in the gut, and at the same time, losing your child in a crowd. It feels like that.
I can relate to that losing the child feeling too. Like just this anxiety, like there's something not quite right here. There's something supposed to be here that's not. Yeah. And then you're like, oh, that thing isn't even healthy for me. Oh, wait, but where's the thing? It's confusing.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
we trusted. That's what we were, that was where we felt safe. And think about it, safety and security, these are primal. These are basic needs.
Yeah.
And betrayal destroys our sense of safety and security. And there are different levels, of course. Like the more we trust, the more we depend on someone, the bigger the betrayal. So let's say a child, for example, who's completely dependent on their parent. The parent does something awful. That's going to have a different impact than, let's say, your coworker taking credit for your idea. Still a betrayal,
Right.
but
Right.
not to the same magnitude. And they, each one is a shock. And that shock, there's something called the love becomes hate, or I think it's the love becomes hate effect. And this is in business. And we would rather know that a product isn't good for us and use that product than feel duped because they didn't let us know. And when a product, even when we thought it was okay and we were told it was okay and we find out it isn't, that's where we loved it. We love something, we get really, really angry.
Oh, I've experienced that running an online business. We certainly never intend to, disappoint someone's expectations, but sometimes like the timeline of a lab is longer than they thought, or and people just really come out like, you broke my trust.
Yeah.
And it's like, we feel, every time this happens, we try to prevent it from happening again, because if you trust in something or someone and then it's not what you thought it was, it really stirs some things up.
It does. And actually, that's the name of my next book, Trust Again. And it's coming out in September. Oh, yeah, because that's one of the hardest things to repair. And, we think, here's the big misconception too. We think time heals all wounds, not betrayal. I have one of the other discoveries was that there's this collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal. It's known as post-betrayal syndrome. And in the past year and a half or so, we've had over 6,000 people take the post-betrayal syndrome quiz right on our site to see to what extent they're struggling. And there's a question that reads, is there anything else you'd like to share? And, besides reading about the physical, mental, emotional symptoms, people write things like, my betrayal happened 40 years ago. I could still feel the hate. My betrayal happened 30 years ago. I'm still unwilling to trust again. My betrayal happened 15 years ago. I feel gutted. And it prevents us from, it affects every area of life. Like in our relationships, the faces change, but it's the same thing. Or we put the big wall up. Nope, no one's getting near me again. Nope, no one's getting near my heart again. Or we see it, I'm sure you see it in health, where people go to the most well-meaning doctors, coaches, healers, therapists for a stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. At the root of most of them is an unhealed betrayal. We see it in business. Oh, yeah.
That's a strong statement.
I see it in the research. And then we see it in relationships where, in work, where people, they want to be a team player, but they're so afraid. The person they trusted the most proved untrustworthy. How are they going to trust a boss or a coworker? Or they want to ask for the raise or promotion, they deserve it, but their confidence was slammed in that betrayal. So they don't have the confidence to ask, and they're bitter and resentful instead. And that's what they're bringing to work with them every day. So it affects every area of life.
You and I mentioned before we came on self-betrayal. That one hit home with me. Can you define that a little bit more? Because I think we see that in health as well.
Oh, sure. This is where, like, as if the betrayal wasn't bad enough, right? Then, this could be anything from, I promise I won't eat that, and then you do. I promise I won't drink that, and then you do. I promise I won't stay with this person who's, saying such horrible things, treating me with such disrespect, and then you do. It's when you're putting your needs on hold, where you're not prioritizing what's in your best interest as well. And I'll tell you, it was interesting. One of the groups in the study who didn't heal, and actually this was the group who was the most sick out of anybody. And this was the group where the betrayer had no consequences. And whether, let's say a marital betrayal, and whether it was because just out of fear, financial fear, they didn't want to break up a family, religion, whatever the reason was, they tried to look the other way. They tried to just get over it. They tried to move past it. And they were so sick. You can't do that to the body. That's self-betrayal. That's betrayal. The heart's broken, has to heal.
Yeah, you have to be honest with that. Yeah, that's what I'm learning. So we're hinting to a lot of things, but not actually saying them. So we have the 5 steps.
Mm-hmm.
We've got your quiz results or your research results.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else you want to make sure? Oh, you said blocks to healing, and like what are the blocks or to healing versus the
Sure. So,
ways
I
you
mean,
go.
I could just tell you that the discoveries. So, one of them was that, first of all, healing from betrayal is very different than healing from other life crises, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster. With any crisis, we grieve, we're sad, we mourn the loss. But because betrayal feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So, the whole self has to be recreated because we have to rebuild from a sense of abandonment, confidence, worthiness, trust, rejection. That all has to be rebuilt, right? So to call it, originally I was studying post-traumatic growth, which, sort of like the upside of trauma, how that trauma left you with a new perspective, awareness, insight that you didn't have beforehand. And I was like, I asked all my study participants, because I've been through death of a loved one. I've been through disease. I had peritonitis. It's a miracle I'm alive. But betrayal felt different. It just felt different. So I asked my study participants and I said, if you've been through something in addition to betrayal, does it feel different? Unanimously, they said it was different because, of how intentional it feels. So it didn't feel like just, not to minimize post-traumatic growth, it's huge, but it didn't feel just like that. So if I were to give an equation, it would be post-traumatic growth plus rebuilding the self equals post-betrayal transformation. So post-betrayal transformation is that complete state of healing from something as traumatic as betrayal.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you want to talk about the steps or the
Sure.
blocks or what allows it?
Yeah. So the 5 stages, and this was so interesting just to see this emerge, out of the data was just like in the geekiest way, the most exciting thing ever. So the 5 stages were, the first is sort of like a setup stage. And this is what I saw with everyone, including myself. If you imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with every single study participant was a real heavy lean on the physical and the mental, and kind of neglecting the emotional and the spiritual. So what does this look like? It looks like we're really good at thinking and doing, and it looks like we're not really prioritizing the feeling and being. And in the feeling and being, that's where our intuition lies. So really common for everyone to say, oh my God, I felt like something wasn't right, but I was too busy.
So you're saying the setup is before you find out. It's
Yes.
when you're on autopilot.
Yes, absolutely.
And you're sweeping things under the rug.
Now,
Your
this isn't
intuition
to
might be telling you.
say, right, this isn't to say if you're busy, it's a setup for betrayal. It's just consistently what I saw. From there, now we get the shock. And here's the breakdown of the body, mind, and worldview. And this is stage 2. And this is that feeling of losing that child in the crowd. The bottoms out on you. There's a breakdown of the body. Now you've ignited the stress response. Every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease is headed your way. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos and overwhelm. You can't wrap your mind around what you just learned. This makes no sense. No sense at all. And your worldview is shattered, how you view the world. So all the rules are destroyed. So you're coming from this physical, mental, emotional space of like, what the heck just happened? Bottom has bottomed out. But think about what happens. If you were walking down the street and the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You would grab hold of anything to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. This is the most practical stage. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How will I survive this experience? Where do I live? How do I feed my kids? Like, it's that practical. Here's the thing though. This stage 3 is the most common stage I see people getting stuck in for life. Because once you've figured how to survive, you think that's as good as it's getting. And that's the problem. And this is why people can stay in that stage 10, 20, 30, 40 plus years.
They're functional, but
you're
their
functioning.
heart is shut down.
That's it. And now you're sort of, the more you plant roots in that space, now you start believing that you belong there. Well, maybe I'm not all that. Maybe I did deserve it. Maybe. And now you're bringing situations and you're bringing people to you that confirm that negative belief and confirm all of that. Now you got some deep roots planted there, and it's like a terrible space to be. And then, then your ego's chiming in with all of the, you think you get all these benefits from staying here. You get to be right. You get someone to blame. You know, you don't have to do the hard work of learning to trust again. You're like, do I trust you? Do I trust you? I forget it. I won't trust anybody. You know, you get to justify inaction. You get a target for your anger. Like, there are a lot of benefits we get here. You know, they're small self benefits though. When
Right. True.
you truly are. When
Be a
we're
victim or whatever.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
huge. And some people think, well, I get to be right. Okay. But you know what you get when you give that up? If you're willing to give that up, willingness is the biggest word here. If you grieve the loss, if you're willing to accept your reality of your betrayal and start, you know, moving forward, and lots of things you could do there, then you get to move to the fourth stage. And this is finding and adjusting to a new normal. Here's where your old normal just isn't an option anymore. It just doesn't exist. And this is like, if you've ever moved into a new house, condo, office, apartment, whatever, you know, it's like, it doesn't feel cozy yet. Your stuff's not there all arranged the way you want, but it's going to be okay. You're kind of telling the body, we're going to be okay here. So you may not be rebuilding your health at this point, but you're not causing the massive destruction that you were. Also, you know, this came up too. When you think about it, if you were moving, you wouldn't necessarily take everything with you. You take the things that feel good, that represent the version of you want to be. And I saw in this stage, if your friends didn't show up for you, if they weren't there for you, as you're changing, oh yeah, if they're treating you like a betrayal is contagious, you know, they're afraid they're going to catch it. You don't take them with you. You've outgrown them. You're outgrowing them. And I saw a lot of that in this stage. Anyway, so now we're in stage 4. When you're making this new space, you know, yours and your new kind of home, and you're there for a while and you're being okay with it, you could slowly move into the 5th most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. Here, the body starts to heal. You're turning the stress response down. You didn't have the bandwidth for self-love, self-care. You were surviving. Now you want to eat better because you love yourself. You want to take better care of yourself. Your mind, you have like new beliefs that are forming because of what you've been experiencing. And you have a new worldview based on where you've been. You see the world very differently. There's also this sort of, you're looking at things through 2 lenses. It's like you're terrified, but you're fearless. You don't want to ask for help, but you ask anyway. It's like, it's just, we're so much richer, more evolved. There's so much more texture to us. And the 4 legs of that table, right? Remember where we're only prioritizing the physical and the mental? Now we're solidly grounded because we're paying attention to the emotional and the spiritual too.
I like it. Do you find that people can kind of weave back to another phase and then up and then back, or
you know,
linear?
There were themes, and with the themes, like the importance of spirituality, that was a theme. Friendships changing, that was a theme. They would be more fluid and flexible and subtle when they would show up, but the stages, you would sort of end one stage and evolve into the next. It wasn't as fluid as the themes. Yeah.
Okay.
One thing was so interesting, and I saw this too, but it varied depending on someone's stage, would be how, let's say they were religious, and then they moved towards the spiritual side of their religion, or with some, they abandoned religion completely and became more spiritual. Or just they just adopted the spiritual practice. And I know I had done that too. And I was like, well, what's the reason for that? And originally I thought, well, we just want this feeling of connectedness. We want to feel we're not alone. And that's true. But it also was because it was a really important part of learning to trust again. Because we don't trust our betrayer. We don't trust ourselves. Because we're like, I'm a bright person. How did I not see this? So we reason, well, at least I can trust in something other than me. And that was one of the reasons why spirituality really played an important role there, or religion.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, my spiritual practice is solid now because you need something to support you. You need something to believe in when everything got dubbed out upside down. So
yeah, it plays a huge role.
So you mentioned that there can be some blocks to healing that we can take on.
Yeah.
What are some of those so we can know to avoid them?
Yeah. So there were three groups that didn't heal. And like I said, the one who was the group that was the most sick, this is where the betrayer had no consequences. So absolutely they did
Oh,
not heal.
okay.
And because the betrayer had no consequences, and they tried as best as they could to turn the other cheek, to overlook, to, tell that to your broken heart, it doesn't work. The two other groups, one was numbing, avoiding, distracting. And this is where, and my first TEDx was about this. And this is where you're using things like food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy, reckless behavior, anything to avoid feeling or facing.
Mm,
And they didn't heal. And like there were people in the study who ran right to their doctors, and I would never say don't take any medication, but they did. Their doctor prescribed mood stabilizers and anti-anxiety medications, and it may have made it easier to get through the day, but it was the ones who, you know, face it, feel it, heal it, and that's what I teach all the time. When they did, they blew the doors off of the ones who were just sort of making it easier to get through the day as far as their healing. So
mm,
numbing and avoiding is a way to prevent your healing. And the other one was they refused to accept their betrayal. And I use this analogy all the time, and it's helpful. If you imagine a house, see, here's the difference between resilience and transformation. Resilience is bringing back, restoring, and you need that for your everyday. Transformation is a totally different thing. So let's say your house needs a new boiler and you get a boiler. That's resilience. Or if it needs a new, roof and you get that roof, that's resilience. Here's transformation, trauma and transformation. A tornado comes by and levels your house. Like the new boiler's not going to fix it, and the new paint job's not going to fix it. Now, you have every right, though, to stand there at the lot where your house once stood and say, oh my gosh, this is horrible. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. And you'd be right. And then you can call your friends over and say, can you believe this? Look what just happened. And they'd say, this is the most terrible thing. Oh my gosh, you okay? And no one would fault you if you mourn the loss of your house the remainder of your days. However, if you choose to rebuild your house, you don't have to, but if you choose to, why build the same house? You can build whatever you want. There's nothing there. And
mm,
when you look at it from that perspective, that's transformation, and that's post-betrayal transformation. Your house has been leveled. You don't have the old house there anymore. So you can mourn it, and you need to. And then if you choose to, you could build something magnificent. And that's what I see in my community every single day.
mm. I think this is a block I'm actually recently working on. And when we talked about self-abandonment earlier, I think, I also read this interesting definition, our identity is not like our qualities or our skills or whatever. It's like our ability to see the truth, like, and make choices on that. And I was like, whoa, because
Yeah.
you hurt yourself when you don't see things as they really are, when you want to believe something else.
You're so right. And I think transformation starts when you tell yourself the truth. I actually have a few questions that I ask people to see if they're numbing and avoiding it. And I used to do it through work. I would dive into my work and you think, well, I'm just working. No, I'm avoiding. And when you realize you're doing that, that's the first step out of it. Like, are you numbing and distracting? And I invite
Mm,
everybody to write these questions down. Am I numbing and distracting? If so,
mm,
how? Be honest with yourself. Are you binge watching TV? Are you eating to forget, or just to numb out, whatever it is? And here's the big question. Ready? Number 2, what am I pretending not to see?
mm.
What am I pretending not to see? And just do this for yourself, or have a close friend with you when you're answering these questions, whatever you need. Then the third question, what's life going to look like if I keep this going? Play it out 5 to 10 years. What's life going to look like 5 to 10 years if I keep this going? Like, let's just take a health issue, right? Let's say you have a health issue. Play that out. If I keep ignoring this health issue, what's life going to look like in 5 to 10 years? Play out that relationship issue. If I keep ignoring this, what's life going to look like in 5 to 10 years, right? And then the last question, what could life look like if I change now? That's not to say it's easy, but that's where transformation begins.
This is beautiful. Really well said. So, I invited you on to talk about quarantine. Of course, there's always other meetings. I think I needed to hear this for me. And I hope that whoever's tuning in or watches this is exactly what they needed to hear for them, because these things aren't discussed nearly enough. So we have this background. I hope we're all in just a different space now after listening to all this about our value and our truth about our emotions. So what I was hoping you could share a bit about is, we're all in this quarantine situation. Some people, as in a blog a friend of ours shared, are actually quarantined in an abusive relationship right now. Others have just had a breakup, and now on top of it, they can't, have any contact with other people. I'm just wondering your thoughts based on your research, people who've reaching out to you, what is sort of potentially coming up for us in these times, and how can we soothe ourselves?
Sure. And I would say, first of all, safety first, right? It's your safety. If you're in danger, get somewhere safe. I mean, that's just number one. You need to be safe, period. To stay with someone who's physically abusing you or something, you need to be safe. So having said that, what happens now if you're, you're the person who betrayed you? I mean, that person is in the house. That's really, really challenging. It's going to be a very, very difficult time. I mean, this is a process. So I don't know how long someone is in that situation for, how long it's been like that.
Right.
But
We're
you
just
need
kind
to
of
respect.
speculating. Yeah.
But this is the thing. What's really important is you need space. You need space. And because you can't think clearly without it. So whether the space is, just rules, do not come into this room, do not be here, whatever it is, or I'm going to be in the kitchen from this time to this time, and you could be in at a different time. There's got to be some level of respect, because you cannot come to your best decisions if you can't think straight. And you can't think straight if that person is like in your face, because it doesn't allow for the death of that old relationship. It's like, personally with me, I mean, this was way back, but I got my husband out of the house and I had no idea what was going to show up. But that was the time where I said, okay, now let me just see what it's like here, doing this, raising the kids on my own, being on my own. And I was able to think. And it was, I talk about that death and rebirth. And it was because, to me, that signified death of the old in order to rebirth the new, whatever that new would have been. So if that person is in your home, something has to be a major shift, whether it's just the way that you both sit together on the couch at that certain time, watching that certain show, whatever it is you're trying to just be okay with to keep the peace. It's not without a price, and you're the one paying the price.
Interesting.
So you really need to, this is a time where you're redefining and creating who you are. And maybe that old version of you, like I know with me, there weren't any boundaries. I never said no. And I'm like, no, there's got to be a new version of you. And maybe this version says, you know what? You really hurt me. You broke my heart. You broke every promise. You violated these wedding vows. I don't want to sit with you. I don't want to act like it's okay, because that's not where I am right now. And again, I would also never say what to do as far as your kids, because some people are like, oh, we don't want to tell the kids. And I have to tell you, from the research, the kids know, they know if something isn't right, and it's so different for every relationship. And do what you totally feel is best. I can only speak to what we did. Everybody has their own way of doing it.
Yeah, I want to share a few things. One is slightly unrelated, but similar. Some people have said, well, what if I'm quarantined in my house with toxic mold? Because that's kind of one of my specialties. And I was like, well, yeah, it's not ideal. Yeah, let's try to not do that. I understand this could have snuck up on people, in which case you're opening windows, you're diffusing essential oils, that kind of a thing. Sometimes you need to make do. But I think it's also, for me, and like hopefully for some other people, like it's a time to make decisions, right? Now you're potentially trapped in this house, or you are about to leave, or whatever is going on. Like, what serves you best? Just kind of like what you said, being honest about, like, I don't want to hang out with you. Or I saw this funny meme on Instagram. It's like, the biggest like breakup line right now would be like, can't see you, like in quarantine. Sometimes we have been in these like unhealthy dynamics. And now it's a time to be like, yeah. But on the flip side, Cynthia Pasquella posted this. I thought it was so true. It's hard to be alone with our feelings and our memories and our hurts that we do such a good job of avoiding with busyness, right? So some of that is what's coming up for people.
Oh, absolutely.
Right now.
And what's so beautiful is by allowing these things to come up, you're going to learn so many things. I mean, everybody learns so much about themselves, stuff that you never allowed, stuff that you tried to stuff down, stuff that, you may have thought it wasn't okay to feel. I mean, sometimes it just needs to be heard. Sometimes it needs to be understood. And I see just in the betrayal community, I mean, these are the strongest people on the planet, because they realize, I tolerated this, that, and the other thing. And no, that doesn't work for me anymore. I've been denying my needs my whole life. No, I'm not doing that again. And it's amazing because it invites people to step up, or they just fade away. I'll give you a little thing here. You can see my hands right here. Okay. This is what I see with relationships. So people are here, and then there's a problem in the relationship. And then people say, oh, I'm so brokenhearted, I just want to be in another relationship. Absolute worst thing in the world you could do. Because when you're here, the only thing you could do is find a match that's here. So then people say, okay, well, now like my work is to get someone to their physical, mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual best, right? If you're so bent on getting into another relationship here, then you do the work to get here, right? Then what happens is you have this weird dynamic going on. So you're like, your other person's still here. So you keep doing this for a while. You're like, okay, but you like it up here, right? But you keep doing this just to make them feel better. And then, or you want them to do this. Well, they're not ready. Right. So then you get this going on, right?
Yeah.
And then that's because this person's like, what happened to you? And you're like, ooh, I'm not the least bit interested in you, because you see things from a very different vantage point right here. So what I really teach is you get to here and you stay so firmly committed and rooted, and this is who you are. You have only a few scenarios that can happen. This doesn't bother you. Like, let's say with a friend, right? You've outgrown your friend's still here. So you just love that friend for who they are, and that's just the end of it, right? You go like this, you each go your own ways. Or you stay so solidly rooted here, this person is only swimming in this sort of pond. The only thing you can do is meet people who are here. So, it's like, that's why when you're here and you're feeling that broken heart and you think, oh, you know what, I just want to ease this pain and find somebody else. I wish I had, like on websites where they have the under construction stamp. I wish I could put that on everybody and say, no, you can't be in a relationship, you're under construction. Because the version of you here is so different than the version of you that will show up here. It happens every time.
Well, let's talk a little bit about timelines then, because I've pondered that same question. And I'm like, well, aren't I going to be under construction for quite a while? Aren't I always under construction? But maybe, I know you said people gotten stuck in a stage, 40 years too, or whatever. But like, what is potentially a timeline that if we're working on this, we're trying, that it could be?
Yeah, there are so many different variables. If I had to say what's the biggest variable, it's willingness. It's willingness. We get so stuck, in that stage 3. It's a willingness to think differently, to respond differently, to react differently. And that's when life, starts changing. It's like, here's your comfort zone. And here's what we do. We get close and then we're like, okay. And then we just keep doing this all the time. We meet up with our comfort zone. We're like, okay, meet up with our comfort zone, back down. And what we need to do is just keep going and pushing ourselves to think differently, respond, react differently, so that we grow. And that's the biggest game changer I see. Is it all has to do with our willingness. I mean, there are so many other factors too. What kind of support do we have, which is crucial? Who are we spending our time with? What kind of support do we have? What beliefs do we have? It's so many different things, but it takes time.
Yeah. I say the same with mold. Actually, I just got interviewed this morning about it. And it's like, having gone through this, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take time. It's going to take several practitioners, lots of change, lots of heartbreak. And it's all worth it in the end. Is the truth.
I never compared betrayal to mold, but there you go.
Here we go. I've been through both now, so maybe I should write my own book about that. Because you compare, you went through serious illness, but this is your harder thing. And I can't help but compare like some of it, I guess, especially it's fresh in my head, like what was hard about that versus what is hard about this. Yeah. And what can I learn from what I went through with that and bring into this? Yeah. And sometimes I feel discouraged, like, oh gosh, yeah, I'm back to this again. And some of my coaches will be like, no, you're not in the same place you were a year ago. You're in a very different place. Yes, sometimes you still feel sad and this happens and that happens, but you are changing. Just like with mold. I'm going to keep making the comparison. Sometimes because you have a flare up, you're like, oh, I'm never going to get better. It's the same. And you're like, no, actually, you've been doing pretty good. You just had a flare up.
And that's it. And we don't realize it because we're going about our day. I use this other analogy. It's like, I compare it to waves. In the very beginning, if you think back to the very beginning, it's so brutal. The waves are just taking you down and you could barely breathe. And then the waves are still taking you down, but there's like enough time just to catch your breath. And then you get knocked down again. And then you find you have a little bit of time to kind of brace yourself until the next wave takes you down. And then over time, it seems like the spaces between the waves get longer and your legs get stronger. And then all of a sudden you're standing there bracing yourself and the waves don't take you down. And then there gets to that point where you're like, I think I'm done with the water. And you go walk back on the sand to your nice lounge chair.
I love that.
And it's like that. And in the beginning, it's truly just getting out of bed can be a big deal. And you feel like you can't even breathe. But then there's that moment truly when you're walking on the warm sand and just, enjoying that well-earned rest.
I love that. Just you can get out of the water.
Get out.
Look at that. Well, I want to share your resources in a minute, but first I just want to say thank you. I've known you for a little while now. You have just the best energy. You're so nurturing and just so kind. And I think this was just I haven't interviewed you yet. It's just meant to be. This was meant to bring us together. I hope it helps a lot of people. I know it's a very tender issue that a lot of people don't, have enough people to talk to about it. So please share. I put in the Facebook already, and I'll put it underneath your quiz. You've got a podcast.
Yeah, the podcast is From Betrayal to Break. That we have just the most amazing experts and discussions on all kinds of things having to heal from betrayal, and it's just that's really helpful. And then the TEDx. Do you have post-betrayal syndrome?
Okay, I will link to both of those when I put this up on YouTube. So if they want to look on YouTube, they look for.
Well, I have two. So the latest TEDx is, do you have post-betrayal syndrome?
Okay. And then the quiz, I will link to, but it's pbtinstitute.com/quiz. Tell us what the quiz will tell you.
The quiz, and I'll be totally honest, a little bit, it's gonna be a little jarring to take it, not so much, but you can't heal what you're unaware of. So we want you aware of every physical, mental, emotional symptom so that you're looking at it saying, oh, I just attributed that to age. No, it's because of your betrayal. Or, oh, I just thought that was normal. No, it's because of betrayal. So it's very telling. You'll learn a lot just by taking the quiz.
Yeah, and I'll say in my community, they're used to us being nerdy and talking about, supplements and studies and stuff. But I truly believe, and it's how I live, that, we are our whole selves. And like you said, you can get stuck in physical symptoms because there's this part you haven't looked at. Mm-hmm. So if you've made it this far in the video, I commend you for watching, but just know that, I don't always talk about it in my work, but it's not because it isn't important. It's because I can send you to people like Debi to, and she's done the study and she has this full background on health. So yeah, I would just say if you made it this far, like, please keep going with it. Because it's so impactful, and like you look, you're just so healthy and glowing, and you're out there and you're so open-hearted. Obviously, any one of us can get to the point where, we are there.
That's it. And I'm not doing anything that anybody else couldn't do. I just did something really good with something really bad. And I look at it like, why should, if we don't do anything with it, it's like a bad game of hot potato. It's like, no, this happened to us, and let's do something really good with it. Like, where not only we heal, we become the highest and best versions of ourselves. And I see that every single day. It truly is a choice. I mean, it can define you where you say, no, that's it. Life stinks and it's awful, and I have all these symptoms now and it's terrible. Or you can say, okay, you know what? I learned so much. I deserve so much better. And I'm creating an entirely new life because of it. It truly is a choice.
Mm. Well, thank you again, Debbie. Really appreciate your time and all the work you put into this. And yeah, let's please stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.